if you're a betting person, I think you wouldn't go far wrong putting money on Keir Starmer not to be Prime Minister after May this year. And that's not investment advice, but I think that was always likely. And I think it's now almost certain.
So first this afternoon, after a bruising week at Westminster, MPs head back to their constituencies today with pressure mounting on Sir Keir Starmer. And with senior Labour figures questioning his judgment over Lord Mandelson's appointment as Britain's ambassador to Washington, it has left Downing Street trying to steady the ship and raising fresh questions about Sir Keir's position in power. With the news coming in the last hours that police are carrying out warrants at 2 addresses related to Lord Mandelson, the man who kicked off this crisis for the Prime Minister. Let's speak first to Patrick Maguire, Times chief political commentator, who's on the line. Good afternoon, Patrick.
Hello, Cathy.
Well, you always have your finger on the pulse. What is happening? What of the rumours and speculation are we to believe?
Well, the rumours and speculation, I think in this case are entirely accurate. The Prime Minister is in a really, really difficult place. And that is not just because of the hair-raising, horrifying specifics of the Mandelson affair and what we've learned this week, but because in appointing him, given all that we've subsequently learned, given all that people knew already about what happens when Labour Prime Ministers appoint Peter Mandelson to positions of power in their governments, given that it was already known that he had a friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, as much as nobody was really talking about that at the time, or very few people were, it puts Keir Starmer in a really difficult place. It means it's very difficult to defend any of the decisions he's made. And it's just the latest in what Labour MPs think are either a series of personal misjudgments, and the book with this is going to stop with the Prime Minister, not any of his advisors, or perhaps the ultimate, most depressing testament to his slightly odd, singular, semi-detached style of leadership, where Keir Starmer isn't really running anything, the criticism goes, but he is run by people with much deeper links and much deeper networks within individual factions in the Labour Party. And that is what many of them think has happened here.
Well, your column today, very interesting. You started by saying basically it's over. Is that odds on?
I think if you're a betting person, I think you wouldn't go far wrong putting money on Keir Starmer not to be Prime Minister after May this year. And that's not investment advice, but I think that was always likely. And I think it's now almost certain. The scale of anger, the scale of dismay, and the willingness for Labour MPs, and not just the usual suspects, to articulate that publicly. I was very taken aback listening to Patrick Hurley, the MP for Southport, which is my hometown, on Times Radio this morning. Patrick Hurley, not a man disposed to hair-trigger criticism of the government. He represents a seat that has never been held by Labour ever before, has every reason to feel very grateful to the Prime Minister and to Morgan McSweeney, the mastermind of that campaign. But when sort of loyalists who keep a low profile like Patrick Hurley are accepting invitations to come on the radio and say, yes, the Prime Minister needs to clear out his backroom team, that is when you're in a profoundly dangerous place as a Downing Street operation. And there's the question, too, of what happens to Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, very close to Peter Mandelson, who was something of a mentor to him and a constant source of counsel and advice on strategy and much else besides, until he was sacked as ambassador in September. Well, look, ultimately, if Morgan McSweeney goes, the Prime Minister goes.
But maybe not. Maybe it will buy him a few more months. Is that a fair reasoning?
I just think it's really difficult for the Prime Minister to mount any kind of argument for sacking Morgan McSweeney that doesn't ultimately justify his own sacking too, his own auto-sacking or his own resignation too. Because what's he going to say? He'll have to find a different pretext because they won't be satisfied with Morgan McSweeney. Chopping and changing Morgan McSweeney isn't necessarily going to solve everything. Yes, it might buy him a couple of months in the same way that sacking Rachel Reeves would probably buy him a couple of months. But I was speaking to a senior government source earlier who said, we're past the point where any of the things the Prime Minister could do to make this better will make things better, because we have had a story, a scandal that is the ultimate indictment in the eyes of many Labour MPs, not many of whom are massive fans of the Prime Minister. They have an instrumental transactional relationship with the Prime Minister. They weren't great fans of him, and they see this, and it's the ultimate testament to what they always feared was true about his judgment, and not just that of his aides. Now, getting rid of Morgan McSweeney might buy him a tiny amount of time, but he's never been leader of the Labour Party without Morgan McSweeney, nor Prime Minister without Morgan McSweeney, and that it's a bold time to test that. And I really, really don't think Labour MPs will just be satisfied with getting rid of one aide. I think lots of them are moving beyond the point where they'll be satisfied with that.
But just finally, Patrick, isn't the biggest lifeline for Keir Starmer the fact that there's no obvious replacement that doesn't have sort of problems? Andy Burnham's not an MP. Angela Rayner's got the HMRC investigation hanging over her. Wes Streeting was pretty close to Peter Mandelson. So that they're all problematic, aren't they?
Yeah, they're all compromised in one way or another, be that politically or personally, for the examples you just gave. And what I wrote in my column, as you say, which opens with two words, "It's over" this morning. Over is an elastic term. I was speaking to a former...
Very canny. Don't nail your colours to the mast.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I have this morning, and lots of Labour people have been in touch with me to say that they agree. But what nobody can agree on, you're right, is when this is going to happen. But I was speaking to a former senior advisor to Boris Johnson last night, who compared it to the scandals of late Partygate. They said at a certain point, we knew the fuse had been lit. We just didn't know how long it had to run. And, if the Prime Minister sacked Morgan McSweeney tomorrow, I'll leave you with this. If he sacked Morgan McSweeney tomorrow, maybe people would calm down for 2 weeks. But what happens in 2 weeks' time? The Gorton and Denton by-election. And do we really think at that point, if Labour loses one of its very safest seats in the heart of Greater Manchester, Labour MPs will say, "Oh, actually, it's all right. I'm a big fan of Keir Starmer, and he's got rid of Morgan McSweeney." Come on, do me a favour. It's really, really bad in Westminster and the country, and it's really difficult to see how this persists. The leadership question will have to resolve itself one way or the other. Who knows? I think the most important variable, the most important known unknown in British politics at the moment is when HMRC are going to give their judgment on Angela Rayner's taxes. And anyone who's dealt with HMRC will probably say, they're not the most efficient arm of the state. But the ultimate test of that will be, do they clear it in time for a leadership challenge before May? Because I think that is the territory we're in now.
Patrick Maguire, thank you very much for joining us. The Times' chief political commentator. He's written another cracking column in the paper this morning, so do have a look at that. Here in the studio with me is Thangham Debbonaire, Labour peer and former frontbencher. Thangham, how big a fix do you think Keir Starmer is in? I mean, is it a question of, he could survive, as Tom Baldwin said there, or is it unlikely?
I think we all know he's in a real fix. He's in a fix because this is a huge scandal. And whilst I am pleased, I was going to say proud, but actually I don't think I can say that. I think pleased that we have at least a system of accountability, which means that all the documents are going to be out in the public domain and they are going to be looked at. That's obviously going to cause Keir Starmer a lot of problems. We don't yet know what's going to be in them. I presume somebody somewhere in number 10 does. I think a man who works as hard as Keir does and has as large a commitment to public service as Keir does has always got a chance of being able to recover things, but recover is definitely the word today. There's a lot of work to do. He's obviously had a terrible week with his backbenchers, and that's really not a good way to set up the next week when there's so many other things to do and we're living in a world of geopolitical instability.
And knowing him personally as you do, what do you think he will be considering whether he can carry on at this point?
I think Keir is a man of such integrity, he will be considering every possibility, and he's done that before after the Hartlepool by-election, as is well known. And he said when the thing about beer was going around that he would resign if he was found to have broken the rules, and he wasn't, so he didn't.
Do you think he might be taking the weekend to think, am I doing the party now more harm than good?
No, I think that in every circumstance, Keir will always think of what's best for the country, what's best for the Labour Party, and he's dedicated his entire life to public service, so of course he's going to be thinking about, is this the right thing to do?
And what's your answer to that question? Is it the right thing for the country and for the party and for all his colleagues, his family? Is it the right thing to carry on?
I hate the thought of instability, and we've got enough of it at the moment. The President of the United States seems to be waking up at 3 a.m. and just tweeting mad things and reversing previous positions, and that's causing huge instability before we even get onto the fact that NATO is being undermined by Donald Trump. I think we can say it best. We've got Russia still in Ukraine. We have massive wars in Sudan and Yemen and Gaza. There's so much going on that's a threat to world stability. And I really want us to have a Prime Minister who can take those on head on. At the moment, as I think your previous interviewers said, there isn't a clear alternative. And when there is no clear alternative, were Keir to resign, that could only result, as far as I can see, in a period of profound instability when we've actually got a lot of things to do as a Labour government. There's an enormous amount going on. There's an enormous amount of good stuff that's also going on.
Keir Starmer
Would that
staying
happen?
could be more instability, though.
Well, I think that's for others to judge. At the moment,
you're a member of the Parliamentary Party.
I am a member of the Parliamentary Party, and I think that at the moment, when I look around me, I don't see anybody coming through with a clear alternative offer. And what I do not want is somebody making a decision and then tumbling us into just absolute chaos. This is bad enough. It's bad enough that there are victims of Jeffrey Epstein who are having to watch this psychodrama play out, which is absolutely awful. It's bad enough that we're in political chaos. It's bad enough that this has gone on for days and will do as all the various bits of evidence come to the Intelligence and Security Committee.
There's speculation that women in suits might be going to tell him time's up when the time is up. You've got a suit on today, very nice pinstripe suit with a little waistcoat. Might that time be coming? Might you be one of those women in suits who would feel, because you're clearly wrestling with this yourself?
Obviously what we're wearing ought to be irrelevant, but I'm glad you like my suit. It is a nice three-piece.
Nice deflection.
However, I think the key thing here is that what we've got is a culture which appears to, and has for some time, I'm afraid, tolerate anyone being an abuser of women and girls. And that isn't to say that we can't just say we've got zero tolerance of actual abusers. We actually have in public life got to have an approach which says we're not okay with people who have continued to be friends with convicted abusers of women and girls. And let's not forget the crime that Jeffrey Epstein actually pleaded guilty and went to prison for before some of the things happened that Peter Mandelson is involved in. That was a serious crime. It was the solicitation of a 14-year-old girl for prostitution, which is in and of itself also something which powerful men in public life, particularly including but not confined to politics, have tolerated for some time. Should women go in and talk to our Prime Minister about tolerating the appearance which is given after a career which actually Keir has tackled violence against women for many, many years. He's got a strong profile on it. This is undermining that past record, and I think appearing to tolerate bystanders was always a bad look. He has sacked Peter Mandelson some time ago, but we need to see really clear commitment from Keir, and that goes beyond, in my view, apologising, though that is absolutely necessary. I think we actually need to see what's the real commitment here, because I've been involved in violence against women work, tackling violence against women for decades, and we've been saying the same things over and over again in the 80s, in the 90s, in the noughties, that it has to be tackled at source and it has to be tackled at bystander level. Peter Mandelson clearly was still friends with someone who'd been convicted of soliciting sex with a 14-year-old girl.
And that was out there. I mean, I reported on it in 2019 that, Epstein, while he was still in jail, took a call from Petey, as he called him, Peter Mandelson. That was the first that anyone had sort of scrutinised Mandelson's friendship with Epstein, but it was out there in 2019. So the fact that no one around Keir Starmer in Downing Street picked up on that, is that partly because it is a boys' club that still in Downing Street?
I mean, the public life, including politics, has been riven with sexism at best and misogyny at worst for a long time. This is nothing new. And I'm not making any individual accusations, but it did not surprise, though it did sadden me, that clearly at some point somebody somewhere, which is why we need to see the evidence, did see that. Because you reported on it, as you said, many years ago. Jim Pickard reported on it also several years ago. So it was in the public domain. And it saddens me, though does not surprise me, that there were people in high levels of politics who saw that and thought, it doesn't matter. It's not that important. It is important. But it matters a lot.
Does the buck for that stop at Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff, or does it stop at Keir Starmer?
I think that obviously there's a lot of anger around, which is being directed towards Morgan. And I think there's also the feeling, which I think Tom Baldwin there articulated, which is even though MPs are clearly disappointed with Keir, I mean, that was visible in Prime Minister's questions. There's no point hiding from that there is ground which he could recover, but he needs to decide how he's going to recover it. And I think it's easy to say...
Does that mean getting rid of Morgan McSweeney? I mean, is that a sort of easy fix?
Is it a fix, though? Is it a fix? And that's what I think we need to see, which is a complete change in the way things are done. In fact, the way that Keir pledged that they were going to change, that he was going to clean up politics. I want to see that turned into action. I believe it can be done. I hope that I'm sure Keir still wants it to be done.
But he hasn't done
it
it for 18 months.
It needs to be seen to be done. And so I want to make sure that while we still have a Prime Minister in Keir Starmer, who's a Labour Prime Minister, who's determined to fix this country, that we actually see that evidence of coming good on what he said. And I want to see that happen.
Baroness Debbonaire, Thangham Debbonaire, thank you very much for joining us.